This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and this episode is brought to you by Silna Health. That's S-I-L-N-A, the premium front-end RCM company that leverages technology with a team of onshore insurance experts to handle benefit checks, eligibility checks, and prior authorizations. Finally, a vendor that you can trust, like a full-time employee that scales with your business. Just mention the Profiles in Leadership podcast to receive a free trial. Today, our guest is Jamey Schrier, physical therapist and a best-selling author, speaker, and the CEO of Practice Freedom U, a business coaching and training company designed for physical therapists. He is a former private practice owner, and his book, The Practice Freedom Method, has helped scores of physical therapists treat less, earn more, and enjoy the life that they deserve. After selling his practice, he began teaching with others and their teams and his proven business methodology to create successful private practices. He has assisted hundreds of owners in achieving financial prosperity and freedom and is on a mission to help hundreds, if not thousands more. Jamey, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate you having me and look forward to it.
Yeah, so let's give a little context here. As far as kind of where you grew up, and you went to PT school, obviously, and you started a private practice, and just kind of give us a little of the background so that we can start from there.
Yeah, I'm an East Coast guy. Grew up right outside of Washington, D.C. Went to University of Maryland for graduate school. Got my master's there, and then later on went back and got my doctorate. Went to University of Delaware undergrad, and let's see. What else did you ask?
So you came out of PT school, and and then you started a private practice, I believe, right?
Yeah, there was a little time in between. Came out, followed the advice of the sages that says, you should go and work in a hospital and do all that. And I was bored in like 3 months. And I always knew I wanted to go into private practice, and finally mustered up enough courage and a few shekels to open up a small practice not too far from where I live.
Okay, and if I remember correctly, you have a Frank Mallon connection too, right?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. So what's interesting is,
And for those
quick
for those
story.
who don't know, just let me say, so Frank Mallon was the CEO of the American Physical Therapy Association for, gosh, like 17 years or something, right? Long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead. So what's your connection there?
So my connection is, I meet this girl at a bar, and 3 weeks later, it's her birthday. We end up dating. She invites me to her birthday, and I'm asking her about her family, and she goes, my dad's a lawyer, and he actually, I think, has a connection with the APTA. At least that's what I heard. So
Okay.
I'm sitting there talking to him, and I'm thinking he's like a big time lawyer in DC, and it's just a counsel. And the more we talk, and the more we talk, I'm like, no, there's something more going on here. So then he starts telling me who he is, and maybe at the time I didn't say perhaps the nicest things about my involvement with the APTA, which at the time was zero. And then I go home, and I'm looking at some thing that I have on my wall, and I'm like, Francis J. Mallon. I go, your dad's a CEO. You didn't tell me this? He's like, I don't know. I mean, he's a lawyer. I go, well, yeah, he might be a lawyer, but he's the CEO of my entire profession.
Yeah.
And I didn't say the nicest thing. So I became a member. I've been a member ever since.
And then you ended up marrying that girl, which was his daughter, right?
I married Colleen, and an interesting story. I started getting involved in the APTA and private practice section but it didn't happen until after he retired.
Okay. Okay.
There's a whole story around that too, we can
Yeah.
maybe dive into, but
Sure.
it
Well, Frank
it's
Mallon
interesting.
was a well-loved guy. Most people who knew him and worked with him just loved him, and he was a great guy. And I had many interactions with him, and just have fond memories of him. So, yeah, what a small world, huh?
It is, yeah,
Yeah.
great guy for sure.
Okay, so now you've started a private practice, and then from what I understand, you had a tragedy. Your practice burnt to the ground at one point. So, what the heck happened?
It did. So I was coming home from the beach on a little getaway, and Frank called my wife, and all of a sudden her face just changed, and I'm driving along, and she goes, "Jamey, there's a fire. I think our building's on fire." And without hesitation, I turned over and I said, "Good. I hope it's my suite, and I hope it burns to the ground." And then we drove right to the building, and the whole thing is on fire. There's fire trucks everywhere. They're throwing my equipment out the window into a dumpster. I can't, they won't even allow me up there. I can't even save my computers or everything. And I kind of share this story because prior to the fire, that was the anxiety and the emotion I was going through and trying to run a business and, you know, build a business and try to be this business owner. And it was not easy. And the fire, I kind of look back and reflect back, and the fire was almost, Steve, like a reset button.
Yeah.
So I don't look at it as a bad thing. I mean, luckily no one was hurt. I look at it now as luckily it happened because it forced me to really think about what I wanted to do and why.
So it sounds like you weren't having fun, you weren't enjoying your time running a practice, and then it's gone. So how long did it take you to get back up and open again?
Yeah, so that happened in October. I was back in late January, early February. So it took a
Okay.
few months to get back. I was trying to leave the profession.
Yeah.
I was like, I had friends in the mortgage business and the real estate. They're making a fortune. They were, they didn't have to study hard and all that. I'm like, well, why can't I do that? They're making all this money. I go, I'm working 67 hours a week trying to scratch enough money to, pay my bills. So I went through that whole thought around there and I said, I'm not going to give up. I love what I do. I love the profession and I love helping others. I go, I don't know what I'm doing. I never had any experience in the business of physical therapy. So I was like, that's when I made the decision that I am going to actually invest in learning how to do the business side of it because I was really good at doing the clinical side. And that's what really shifted for me, which is why I look at it as a blessing now versus a
Yeah.
a tragedy, a
Mhm.
tragedy.
And how did you do that? Did you have a mentor? Did you do a lot of reading? Did you just learn by mistakes and get better? How did you develop the system? And you wrote a book. I should just hold this up for those that are watching this, the Practice Freedom Method. Um, and so basically, you've made it your work to help others figure out how to do this. So how did you learn how to do it?
Yeah, so all of the above.
Okay.
In what you're saying, all the above. I began reading more, which I wasn't a huge reader. I think one of my first books was The E-Myth, Entrepreneurial Myth, Michael Gerber, pretty
Yeah. Yeah.
standard book. I
Know that
read
one.
Rich
Yeah.
Dad, Poor Dad, and they really started to resonate with me. And I started to understand, at least conceptually, what they were talking about. And it kind of I just said, okay, I can see how I could do that in this business. I looked out for different mentors and coaches. Back when this happened, there wasn't the coaches there are now. I mean, right now there's hundreds of coaches just in our profession.
Yeah.
There wasn't. There was a couple of programs. Um, And I did invest in some of those, which they were okay. They weren't great. So I went outside the profession. I went and connected with just other people in business, and I connected with this company called Strategic Coach and Dan Sullivan, and with some other persons. I hired a personal coach for myself, and really invested in doing that. So between the mentorship, the coaching, the reading, of course, the trial and error, I just kind of told myself, I'm willing to try whatever it takes because I want what I want. And what I really wanted is a business that I didn't have to work in 60, 70 hours a week, that could give me the life that I wanted, that could support that financially and with the time I wanted. And 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 full transparency, Stephen. I thought it would take me about 18 months. And I
Okay.
know you've owned a business and a
Yeah.
big business. Yeah, I was a little off. It took me
Little, yeah.
9 years,
Yeah, yeah,
and
for
my
sure.
business was not huge. I grew it to about 1.4 million. But it took me 9 years because God, I had a lot to learn, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I realized that there was a lot of stuff ingrained in myself that it took me a lot of time to get over me. But
Yeah.
I finally was able to do it, but I had a lot of support along the way.
Well, it brings up the comment that we've made a million times on this show, and I'm sure you've said it too. It's in your book as well. Is that, when we go to physical therapy school, we learn the techniques and the tasks and the hands-on and the diagnosis and differential diagnosis and all those things that make us good PTs. But we don't learn a lot about business. And we don't really have that mindset, so to speak. And then you even said in the book that you grew up in a I think you stated as a financially unstable family, so you don't even have the experience of that. So now you just jump into business. So you can see why you and others have struggled because you just it's not as easy as it seems, or it's maybe
Yeah.
we're so naive that we just don't have a clue as to what it's going to take to make it fly.
Yeah, I think there's entrepreneurs that need a little bit of naivety, because if they knew everything it takes, maybe they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think a lot of it's ego. We grew up pretty smart people, not a lot of B's and C's on our report cards. We did well, and I think sometimes that ego in one area transfers to another because if I'm smart, then I should know how to do this too. But if there isn't any training, if there isn't any experience, how do you magically think that you're going to be successful in this business? That was my problem. I thought I would be successful because I'm Jamey. I should know how to do this. I'm going to be really good with people and really good at delivering care, and realizing that, yes, delivering good care is important, but there are so many other aspects to running a successful business. And if you don't know, you just can't will yourself to know it. You have to take the time to learn. And that was a big lesson for me.
So, what does your business look like now? So, you have a physical therapy business that you run. Is that a couple clinics, or how does that look? And then
No,
you also have now you consult with other business owners and whatever. So, just tell us what your business looks like now in structure.
yeah. So what happened is it took me 9 years. So it was 2004 when the fire happened. And 9 years later, I took myself officially off the schedule. I was on the schedule. I was only treating maybe a couple people a week, but I wanted to know what it was like. People told me like, Jamey, don't do it. What is your staff going to think? What are doctors going to think? And all these other, scary fear stories. And I said, I need to know what it's like. I need to experience it myself. So I removed myself from the schedule, removed a few people I had on my schedule to my other staff, and I really became the CEO, the owner. And that was in 2013. And in that year, beginning of 2013 in January, in that year, and I tracked all of this, I took 137 days off because I was tracking my days off and how I organized my calendar, and made more money than I've ever made in my business. And I was in the office, I don't know, a few hours a week at the most. I had a good team, small team, but a good team. I had some management in place. And I went on. it wasn't a podcast. I went on a webinar. I think it was a webinar at PPS. I'm almost positive. And I talked about building your practice like McDonald's. And it was well attended. It was the first time I ever did a webinar. Never even heard of a webinar. I had to put a slide deck together, which that was a nightmare. And
Right.
I had a couple people reach out to me afterwards and said, "Thank you so much. That was really great. Could you help me?" And I'm like, I guess. Like I didn't do it to actually be a coach. I just wanted to share my experience. So then I started working with them and helping them in the business. And Stephen, I fell in love with it. I was like, this is who I am. This is what I'm built for. I'm built to help people, but help people in this world of business and help them build the life in the business and the impact they want to make. And I started building that business, which is now called Practice Freedom U. A couple years later, I got an offer to sell my PT practice. Now it was kind of running, but as nothing's run purely automated. There's no pure passive income. It does take work still. And I just didn't have the passion to continue to build and open up multiple clinics, which was my idea. I didn't really care that much. So I sold it in
Okay.
2016
Okay.
and doubled down on building Practice Freedom U, which has grown 10 times since then. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm coaching other private practice owners, a lot within the physical therapy world, but we've branched out into some other streams, mental health being one and pediatrics being another. And yeah, we've worked with hundreds of practice owners. And the idea is the book came from, I wanted to capture the experience because time, you start to forget about it, you start to forget what it feels like. And I wanted to capture a real story because I didn't see this anywhere in our industry. Now I think people have written books, but I wanted to capture how I was really feeling going through this. Instead of just talking about the concepts and the strategy, I wanted to connect with people. Like, behind the scenes, I was a shit show. I was in anxiety. I had to go on medication. I was drinking a lot. The relationship I had with my beautiful wife was not perfect. The time I had with my kids, I was missing my kids' first soccer game ever. I'm stuck at work doing some notes. Like, this stuff was affecting me because it started to go back to my childhood when I was like, I won't do the same things. Like, I want to be there for my kids and all of that. So there was really so much more going on. And I think people really resonated because that's what goes on with a lot of people behind the scenes. But at the conference events, at the stuff, nobody shares that stuff because we have this shield, we have this invulnerability thing. And I think that that's like one of the things I'm most proud of.
So, what's your typical client? Do you work with smaller practice owners? I mean, smaller as just one or two facilities, or do you work with some bigger groups as well? Who hires you, and what's
Yeah,
usually the first thing you do?
I've personally worked with a large company, the largest rehab company, and I'm sure you know who they are. I've worked with them before and their VP, and I enjoyed it. He was great to work with. And what I found was I like the entrepreneur. I like the smaller business. I like that, 1 million to 5, $7 million practice. That's just really what resonates with me. So that's predominantly who we focus on. We do take people smaller than that as well, as long as they're the right fit. So it's the practice owner that is struggling with the complexities of business, struggling with the balancing act that we have, as the E-Myth talks about, the idea of wearing the multiple hats, of being the owner, being the manager, and being the technician, a lot of times still being in the world of treatment. And how do you balance that? How do you organize that? How do you make sure you don't get burned out or, help your staff not get burned out? How do you make the money to support your life? So different people have different challenges, and our approach is to try to meet people where they are and not trying to give them here's the cookie cutter way of doing it, because it doesn't work for everyone. So the methodology is the methodology. This is how you build a business. This is how you built your business. anything I share is not going to be earth-shattering news. It's how it gets implemented to where someone is based on what they're going through, based on what their skills and strengths are, what their resources are, and most importantly is what they want. So that's kind of how I approach
Yeah.
things. That's, perhaps a little different, I guess. I don't know.
And so, if you have somebody that seeks you out and is struggling or needs some help to get to the next level, whatever, that's often a big step because now I'm saying, oh, now I've even got to invest more money to try and do this.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, well, I'd love to do that, but I just can't afford it. Or the one that we always hear a lot is I don't have time to do it, which is always a funny one, but a lot of people feel that way. So it's a big step for those practice owners to say, okay, I'm going to hire Jamey and I'm going to pay him money to help me.
Yeah. Yeah, making an investment of any type is a big decision. And what I find, and this is one of our exercises that we do with our clients, is the first thing we have to do is get really clear on what it is that you want. Because we know we're not stupid, we're very smart people, and we know nothing that we really want is just going to happen. We have to make an investment, time, money, energy. We have to make an investment. And a lot of times I share the analogy of school, right? When we were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, we had this picture of being a physical therapist, right? It wasn't rational, it was a reality. I want to be a physical therapist. So we sacrificed. We studied. Our friends are partying. We stayed in. We did what we had to do to get into school. No guarantee. And then when we got into school, we wrote big checks, now even bigger. But we wrote checks to be in PT school. Again, no guarantee that we're going to even pass PT school. No guarantee we're going to pass the boards. No guarantee we're going to get a job. But we weren't thinking like that because we just wanted what we were wanting and we were going to do whatever it takes to get there. And then we get a job, right? And then we start working. No guarantees in any of this. But Stephen, what happens is we open up a business, but we don't think of it the same way. A lot of times, and I've talked to a lot of people, we open up a business trying to get away from something else. Like I didn't like the job I was at. They weren't doing the therapy that I thought we should do. So I opened up a business. And what I try to help people do is get clear on what is it you're trying to do? What do you want to do? What's the impact you want to make? Who do you want to make this with? How is this going to affect your life and your
Yeah.
relationships? And trying to get really clear on, as we all know, Simon Sinek and others talk about that why,
Right.
because I'm trying to help people bring back that innocent energy, vision, and passion of what you did to get in school when you wrote six-figure checks without any guarantee in anything. And now in your business, it's like we don't invest much at all, but yet we want
Yeah.
the results, and it doesn't work like that.
Well,
So
a couple of things come to mind when you talk about that is I couldn't agree with you more. I think a lot of times people go into private practice for the wrong reasons. And you have to know what those reasons are. And if you look at the entrepreneurial world, they're very much like, oh, I did this because I thought I could do this better, or I did this because there's a need that's not there that I could meet. And you don't do it to um, be your own boss. That's the only reason. You don't do it because you want to choose your own hours to work. You don't do it for those reasons. To me, those are the wrong reasons to start a business. So I think you're right on. You got to do it for the right reasons. And then the other thing you talked a lot about that I've said before too is that what you talked about getting into school and going through school, they're very task oriented things. You do this, you do that, you check the box, you check the box, you do this, you do that. And then you get into the real world, let's call it, and now you're expected to be an innovator and a leader and much more of a right brain thinker, to get this business off the ground and whatever. And I think people really struggle with that because they're used to being a taskmaster,
yeah,
yeah, so it's real interesting that helping people see that I think is kind of what you're doing.
yeah, absolutely. You start looking at some of the research out there and you kind of look at our education system. And I speak bluntly about our education system. And you look at, I mean, we still have bells, right? I mean, that whole concept of bell. right? It's like Pavlov's dog, a bell, the kids come, a bell, the kids sit. Since we were, I don't know how old, 5, our time has been indicated and been controlled by someone else, right? Like
Yeah.
schooling is someone else's time. And that goes all the way through your end of school, right? And then you get a job. And now your time's controlled by who? The boss, right? The owner. Then you go into practice for yourself. You are in charge of your own time. You have 7 days in a week. You choose everything, but you have zero experience doing that. Zero experience. But what you know how to do, Stephen, is what? I know how to work.
Yeah.
So what do? You just work. Every answer is work, work, more hours. And then you get into this place when you're first starting, we call it the overwhelmed operator stage, which is like a 500,000 to 1,000,000. And you get into this place of, I don't have any more hours. I'm working a ton and I have all these problems. I'm juggling the balls or spinning the plates, whatever analogy, and you just don't know what to do. And so many people never get out of that because you have to start operating different. It's like the operating, I like to use the iOS system, right? The operating system that you used in school worked for you in school. Then you shifted the operating system to be an employee of a company or of a business. But what you haven't done is then shifted and upgraded the operating system of how do you be an owner of your own business? That is going to be the toughest challenge. So that analogy is, what are you doing to upgrade your operating system to create the business, to impact the people you want, and to have the life and the money and the things that you deserve? That whole way of thinking, most people don't have a clue about that because they have no training except to know how to be a better clinician, because that's all the training we had.
Yeah. And you talk in the book a lot about, you know, choosing your time and how you choose your time. And you talk about the 80-20 rule. Now, most people would think the 80 rule is the work side, but you're saying the 20 rule, the 80 side of this equation is your free time, is time that you do. I guess my question is, I think we could all agree that starting business and being having it do well takes hard work. So,
Yeah.
is the 80-20 rule? What do your clients say when you say that that's what our goal is? They look at you like they don't believe you.
Yeah. So that rule for someone starting out, it's time and work. There's a lot to do. It's not going to get done by you sitting there and doing nothing for 80% of your time. That rule is for people that as they start to grow, they get into a 500,000, 1,000,000, 2,000,000, 5,000,000, 10,000,000, except that's where that starts to become more important, with how you're using your time, not for the smaller people. So I never want to confuse people like, hey,
Okay.
I have a $400,000 business. Hey, Jamey, I'm not working. I got other people working for me. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not, you haven't
Okay.
established any foundation, any systems and processes yet. You have to be in there. But for the other people, it is an interesting perspective. The idea of, have you ever heard of this one, Stephen? If you want to make 10 times more, you need to work 10 times less. You ever heard of that?
I have not heard of that, but yeah.
It's the same perspective. It's the idea of you have to define what work is. You
Yeah.
see, there's people out there, and you're a great example because you were the CEO of your company. Maybe at one point you were treating, maybe in the beginning, I don't know,
Yeah, I
but
was.
you weren't treating when you had all the company, all the locations and the people and the team. You weren't doing that. You were doing your job, your role. And in the beginning, yeah, we have to do what we have to do. We're trading, we're doing that. But then at some point, if you don't start leveraging your time to focus on things that only you can do, you're the best relationship person there is. You're the best strategic thinker there is. It's your business, it's your vision. You're literally making up the vision. your company, Physiotherapy Associates, you made that up, or you and your partners. It didn't have to be there. You didn't read a book about it. You just said, this is what I want to create. And then as you started doing it, it started to evolve. And then you came up with other ideas. Schrier Physical Therapy was something that I just created. So you need time, you need energy, you need quiet time to think. And if you don't have that, you make decisions based on reactions. You make decisions based on emotion. And we all know the amygdala, when that thing is sparking, when intelligence or when emotion is high, intelligence is low. So many of us, the reason we are where we are is simply because we're not making the best decisions, and we're not because we're so overwhelmed and inundated with stuff, we don't block out time to think. So it's not to work. It's shifting the definition of work and where you spend your time. And if you do it in a certain way, you'll see all the busy work starts to go, and the work you're doing is creating a 10 times result, but you're not doing it 10 times, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, a point of clarification. I was the CEO of Therapeutic Associates, not
Therapeutic
yeah,
Associates.
yeah. So no
Thank
worries
you.
there. Let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of it then, and you lay this out in the book, and it's very well done. And you talk about instead of just nose to the grindstone and treating patients, you have to start by, building your staff and building that culture and so that people can take things on off your plate, so to speak. And you talk about the active appreciation, and it's a simple thing, but just explain what that is and how you came to instill that into your company.
Yeah, active appreciation is a form of gratitude, and gratitude in the last several years is getting a little more attention than it used to get because of the research that's coming of what gratitude and having a positive outlook and a positive um, spin on things does chemically into our brains. To be fully transparent, I didn't know really all that. I just knew that I was a pretty pessimistic person, and if someone asked me what's going on, I didn't really start out saying all the great things that were going on. I was condemning, complaining, and all of that, like everyone else was. And what I started to learn is that when I started to become and take time to become more grateful for things, um, it shifted how I felt. It shifted how I showed up. I started to become appreciative of my staff, not just thinking that, but actually sharing it with them. And I talk about this thing called the gratitude triangle, which if you can just picture a triangle and just cut the triangle in half, there's social gratitude, which all of us are taught when we're younger, please and thank you. And then there's true gratitude, appreciation. The difference is the emotion connected to it. And as I started spending at first, maybe a couple times a week for 2 minutes, just what do I appreciate about today? What do I appreciate about my team? One exercise I did is I know that sometimes I walked into a room with a patient, especially a new patient, and I had a million things in my head. And sometimes I wouldn't show up fully present, and people can sense that. I was in a rush or I didn't really was listening. And I said, before every patient, no matter what, I'm going to pause for 5 or 10 seconds and I'm going to ask the question, Jamey, what do you appreciate about this person you're about to see? And I would come up with things like they're taking an active role in their health. They chose Schrier Physical Therapy. They trust us. They took time to come here. They're investing in their health. Like, it would recenter and ground me, and I would show up completely different in that room. I did the same thing then when I showed up in staff meetings. Same thing in performance reviews. Same thing when I showed up in a doctor's office. And the more I did this, the more like good things would start to happen.
Hmm.
Um, so it just became now, years later, it's just a habit. It's just a part of who I am. But it's practicing gratitude. And it
Yeah.
does take practice. And it's unbelievable what starts to happen. And I've seen transformations like no one else with some of our clients that were the most negative freaking people in the world that start to like, they're not as negative. And the biggest change happens, or the biggest aha happens when they kind of go back to their group. Like, let's say they've been in our program for a year or two, and all of a sudden they meet some friends that they haven't seen. They're like, what's different about you? Like, what's going on? And they don't
Yeah.
even recognize it anymore. Just so many positive things that happen, and so many there's healthy benefits to it as well. But it does take
Yeah.
practice, and it's
It
not
does.
easy because we do live in a negative world.
Well, it's a mindset, and a couple
Yeah.
things jumped to my mind when you're telling that story. Is we used to have family meetings when I had a young family, and once a week we'd have a family meeting with an agenda, before dinner, and we'd have a meeting, and we always started those meetings off with appreciations. And so, one kid would say, they go, well, I really appreciate my sister because she helped me find the homework I lost, or I really appreciate my mom because she did this for me today. And so you're right that the practice of doing that, I think, is a really good idea. And I worked as a waiter in college, and I remember, we would like you get the worst, um, person come in your restaurants just pissed at everything and grouchy and everything's wrong and whatever. And we always made it our goal by the end of the time, I'm going to turn that person. I'm going to turn them around. And you just use all these sayings and things you do and whatever to turn that person around. And it was pretty amazing how many times you could. You could take some crotchety old, bent out of shape person, and by the end of the time, you could actually stand them. So it works.
And here's the real power of it, because some people listening might be, oh, that's nice, practice gratitude, yeah, 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 yeah. But here's the power. Here's like the bottom line power. Your effectiveness as a leader really comes down to how you show up, your presence, whether it's in staff meetings, whether it's in patients, and what you have to be working on is elevating you and elevating how you show up and your ability to communicate and connect. And gratitude is 100% the most important thing that will help you do that, which will in turn help you have better relationships with your staff, which will in turn help them be better at what they do and more productive,
Yeah,
versus
absolutely.
the pointing, command, control, the
Right.
berating or complaining and all that. And it's hard because our society, especially all the social media, it's just all negative. So
Yeah.
when you're practicing gratitude, I will tell it, and I say it to our clients, look, you're fighting a really difficult landscape. So be
Yeah.
mindful of the people you associate with. Sometimes you got to associate with certain people and negative, but if you're building your team, if you got a bunch of negative Nellies on your team, most likely they're negative because that's how you're showing up and that's who you're allowing on your team, which means you're building a culture of the very people that you're trying to tell yourself, I don't want these types of people, but they're following you because you're the leader. So if you start to change who you are, it's amazing what happens, how you start to use this law of attraction and you start to attract better people, because A players ain't going to come to a C owner. That is
Yeah.
not going to happen.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it in what you were just saying there, and it's leadership 101, which is you're building relationships. And so just finding ways to, everybody likes to hear when they're doing a good job, and everyone likes it when you notice something that you've done special. I mean, what people don't like is when they feel like they went above and beyond and no one recognizes it. So, just pointing that out. I've told this story a million times, but I can remember one time when I was treating patients, and it was one of those crazy days, and you're just seeing all the patients and just crazy, and I'm trying to get my notes done and the patients treated, and then I run out the door because I got to get home to a family event, and got in my car and realized that Brooke, my front office person, I hadn't even said goodnight. I just, ran out of the clinic and took off, and my day went really well, and I was really productive, and she had a lot to do with that. So
Yeah.
pick up my cell phone on the way home, and I just say, hey, Brooke, I just want to let you know you were awesome today. You made me look good, and it was a great day, and I just really want to thank you for everything you did today, and have a good night. That phone call took 15 or 20 seconds. That
Yeah.
phone call, every staff member that was in that clinic heard about that phone call, and it just made such a difference. And so little things like that, if we just recognize, if you have the mindset of building relationships and and celebrating the small wins and telling people, that they do a good job, it comes back to you tenfold. It really does.
Yeah. I don't know you well. For people listening, I don't know Stephen well. But what I do know of you, people say very similar things. And one of them is you are very gracious and you are very, you do acknowledge people and you are appreciative of people. That is what I have heard over the years that I've heard your name and finally met you. And to kind of share it with people out there, that is not an accident. That is an intention of not just who you are, but you also practice that. Like you had a moment of I can choose to call her or not. And you could have told yourself a story. We all have stories. You could have said, oh, whatever, I'll tell her tomorrow. She's fine. She doesn't care, But you didn't do that. And by operating like that with your relationships, like you said, and it's probably more than tenfold, your life is probably 100-fold better because that's how you chose to show up. And what I encourage people and implore people to do is choose to show up as your best self. And a way to do it is to practice this gratitude in your own life and then practice it in sharing, acknowledging of others.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
amazing what will happen in your life and your
And
relationships
and
and
you
opportunities.
said in the book too, which you've just said again, but it's like, just stay out of the negative zone. No one likes to be around negative energy. And, if nothing's worse than to work somewhere and have everybody in the lunchroom or something just bitch and moan and groan and complain. And where it's just like, oh, it's so miserable. Just, don't be a part of that. Stay out of the negative zone, as you say in the
The
book.
only people that like to be a part of the negative zone is other people who are in the negative zone.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you
Exactly.
find a lot of drama in your practice, you really have to look at what type of message are you sending. You talked earlier about, how to set up your business and what are some of the core things, and you brought up gratitude. I think even in addition to that, it's really getting clear, not just as an exercise, oh, what's your vision and what's your mission, but really diving into what your values are. To me, values are beliefs. So what do you believe in? What do you believe is true? Because those beliefs, they set the tone of your culture. Culture is about behavior. Culture is about behavior when you're not there. If you have a good culture, it's because they are buying into your ideals and beliefs, and that's how they're behaving, whether you're there or not. But if we don't spend time on that, or if we don't actually exemplify that, then you are going to attract what you are putting out there, which is most likely not the values that you truly believe in. So by making that intentional, you start to bring in the right kind of people. And what it really does also, it acts as a repellent to repel the people that are not the right fit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk about another one that I think both you and I agree on, that as you get bigger and as you um, have multiple sites or bigger clinics or whatever, delegation is something that you just got to embrace. And
Yeah.
again, going back on how we were brought up and what we learned, I don't think we're always very good delegators. So, you have to let people do their things and make mistakes and learn and grow from them, just like you did. And delegation is a key factor in scaling your business for sure.
Yeah, so when we talk about trying to create a business that's more efficient, you look at things, what are things that can be automated, delegated, or eliminated? Eliminated is we don't need to do this anymore. We're at a different level. Obviously, automated using the technology that's out there. But this idea of delegation, and we try to teach our clients young in this, meaning below 1 million. Delegation requires two words, and these two words are not easy words, or they're very simple. The words are let and go. Simple words,
Yeah.
Five letters
Yeah.
total. But letting go is certainly not easy because we're used to doing it ourselves. We're used to doing it on our own. And letting go can take a lot of different flavors. One of it is letting go means I'm not good enough, right? I got to let this go because I'm having trouble doing it. It's like you're admitting you need help. You're admitting you're less than if you need help. And that's a mindset shift versus the way you described it, of course. The other thing that goes with letting go, the deeper level, now we're kind of below the surface of the ocean, is really comes down to trust, and it comes down to identity. First, trust. Trust is about the trust in someone else to do it, right? Do we trust them? Not do we trust them they're going to do it as well as you? Because we're always going to say no one can treat as well as we can. But trust that with the right training, with the right mentoring, they can do a pretty darn good job that's in line with what we're saying what we can do. So that's a trust. The deeper one, even below trust, is identity. And this is the
Mm,
one I get a lot, Stephen. So if I hire other therapists, if I hire other managers, and I'm not the therapist, I'm not the director, who am I? And that words, who am I, is a deeper thing more than anything else because you have, especially during school, and since you got your license, you've identified yourself, I'm a physical therapist. And it's about reframing that yes, you have a license, but it's not who you are. And that takes work right there for sure. But once you start to see yourself in a different light, it becomes like you just start to rise to this different level in your business. But letting go, having trust in others to help, and embracing the new identity, because you've embraced lots of identities in your business, right? From therapist
yeah.
to the director, the manager, to the owner, CEO, whatever it is. And now you have a new identity. So it's
Yeah.
all about embracing these new identities, but you don't embrace a new identity unless you're willing to go outside of this comfort zone and expand what's possible for you. And for the people that don't, I mean, that's your choice.
Yeah.
But for the people that do, it does take guidance. Guidance is needed because it's
Yeah.
not easy to do on your own.
Well, and I think delegation is such an important piece, and you got to be willing to do it. And then you got to be clear about what your expectations are. I was looking, I was a young CEO and I was looking for administrative assistant. And, I went through a couple short versions of that, which wasn't very good. And then I finally got one that was with me the whole rest of my time. But she came from the banking world. And in the banking world, everything is structured, protocol, double check, triple check, do this, do that. You don't make any decisions on your own. And so the first day I hired her and the first day she came in, I said, okay, now here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to, watch me and study me and get to the point where you know what I'm going to say if somebody asks me a question, like what would I do? What would Steve do? And then if I'm not around or I'm out of town or I'm not available, I want you just to go ahead and make that decision and say it's okay and yes, we can do this or whatever. And then if it's wrong, if it or wrong's not the right word, if it's not perfect, then we can say, well, I might have done that a little differently, and we'll learn and grow from that, and we'll do it. And she told me later that she went home that night and told her husband that she was going to come back the next day and quit because that was so far out of her comfort zone to
Yeah.
to think like that and be like that. But she hung in there. We talked through it, and then she was with me for 17 years. So it's like, you know, uh, um, I was very clear on what I wanted, and it took her a while to get there, but yet I trusted her and gave her very clear expectations of what I wanted. And after a while, we figured it out, and it worked well. So those are the kind of trust relationships that you need to develop when you delegate, and then and realize that they're not going to do it perfect. And if they do it wrong sometimes or do it in a different way, then let's talk about it, learn from it, and then let's see what happens next time. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't do it all. you have to let go and find that right person. And the way you worked with her, I mean, I
Yeah.
love that. It's such a natural, organic, thing. So that's a cool story.
Another thing that I want to talk a little bit about too, when you're talking with your clients, staff meetings. You know, everyone, people don't have enough staff meetings. You know, they think, oh, meeting's a waste of time, and everyone's bored and no one's engaged and whatever. But I think staff meetings are important. You say in your book that you should have regular staff meetings because people they got to know the score. They got to know what's going on. They got to know what you're thinking. They got to know what went well and what didn't go well. And you
Yeah.
need to have those discussions.
Yeah, I think bigger companies, at least some of the friends and neighbors I have, bigger companies have probably too many meetings. And smaller companies don't have enough meetings.
Yeah.
So, speaking with, the type of people we work with, um, it's usually not enough meetings and it's because you're too busy. But you can't get on the same page if you're not actually speaking and looking. So I look at a meeting as a little bit of a reflection back. If it's a staff meetings you should have at least once a week. How do things go? What kills me, Steve, is like people are like, oh, our cancellations skyrocketing. Oh, well, how long have you had this? It's like 4 months. I go, how could it possibly be 4 months? Any
Yeah.
strategy in the world would have changed it somehow. Oh, well, we don't really have staff meetings. I'm like, so you didn't have 16 opportunities to modify your cancellations. So staff meetings allow people to share their KPIs, their key metrics, allow to discuss I like to focus on a staff meeting as start off with gratitude. What's working well? Share your wins. Maybe you had a really great experience with a client or with a patient, or maybe you handled a person on the phone. Like, share your good stuff, and then share, what are the challenges you're having.
Yeah.
Share your numbers. What's working well with them? Where are you having trouble? How are you handling that? And then you can ask questions. What help do you need? And then, use the group to brainstorm and then come up with the plan. So what's going to be the plan? What do you intend to do in the next week? I look forward to seeing that next
Yeah.
week. And you get into that rhythm, that meeting rhythm. And I think it's because we're just continue to operate out of this world of busyness and world of reaction that we only see a staff meeting as I can't see a patient during that time.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't have it. And you never get your business moving in the right direction. So it's
I,
critical to have communications on a regular basis.
I agree. And how you do a staff meeting is part of the education and experience too. When I was the CEO of my company, we had, multiple locations. And so I would often say, well, I'd go out and meet people on their own turf. And sometimes I say, when's your next staff meeting? Well, I'll come to that. So I saw a ton of staff meetings. And the two extremes I remember the most was so one staff meeting was the owner director stood up and for 55 minutes out of the 60 did all the talking. We got to do this. Our numbers are this. We got to do this. You need to do this. You need to do that. We're going to, just talk the whole time. The other example was uh, the owner director comes in and everyone on the staff had a section of the agenda that they covered. And he sat back and ate his lunch and might have said, five or six things throughout the whole hour. And all the rest was run by the staff. And this is what we're seeing. This is what we're doing. This is what we're going to do to make it better, whatever. I mean, it's just
Which
so,
which clinic was more profitable?
there's no question. And so it's like, okay. So, yeah, I mean, you don't use them just to, just drill down information to people from one person because people tune you out. But if they're involved and they have responsibility for a piece of this, and as you say, you come up, you identify the issue, you come up with a plan. Each member of the team says, "This is what I can do to help that plan, and see if that works." And then you look at it and you study it. And if you weren't able to move the needle by doing the things you said you're going to do, then you change the plan. You don't just keep doing the same thing. So if it did move the needle, then we do more of that. So, it's just it's a
When
mindset
you
and a
see it from
structure.
that perspective, it's not complicated. And the
Yeah.
problem is, Steve, we make things so damn complicated
Yeah.
because we feel it needs to be more difficult than it really is because we're so used to having so much drama and stuff happening that when we start to take a deep breath and kind of back away from the day-to-day craziness, you realize there's only a couple key things that you really have to do well. And anything around your staff, especially a bigger company, is a key thing. Like anytime I'm working with someone, if it has to do with their staff, that's like the biggest thing because that's your biggest leverage point. So then the question becomes, how can you show up better for your staff? Have you heard of the upside down triangle before?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Nordstrom has that as their
yeah.
Nordstrom stores. Yeah. So, and
So,
the
which is
CEO's at the
cool.
bottom.
Yeah, I don't think I got it from there. I thought I made it up, but maybe subliminally I didn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I kind of looked at it as when I started going through my own training and I said, well, if I'm here to support my team, then shouldn't I be supporting them this way, not supporting them like from a top down? And I started
Exactly.
looking at different, leadership models and command
Yeah.
and control and all that. And it just kind of gives you a visual perspective, like the job of the owners support the management team. The job of the management team is support the staff. We're here to support them. That means if they're not doing well, it's not necessarily their fault. What can we do to show up better for them? That reframe will change how you think and the actions you take, and absolutely the results you get. But you have to be willing. You have to be willing to do that, which means you have to have people that you truly, you know, trust and respect and believe in to help build this vision for you. Because if not, just have a one person practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, Jamie, we could probably go on forever talking about this stuff, but
Sure, we could.
is there anything that I haven't asked you today in anticipation of our discussion that you think you want to get in the program and talk about?
You know what? I really loved your questions. I loved the book. Talking a lot about the book. I think that for me, it brought up a lot of things that I don't necessarily get a chance to talk about, and when I'm on, speaking on different things. So I thought that was really cool. Kind of brought up some really cool perspectives. No,
Yeah.
I think you covered some good stuff. I just hope that your audience grabs
Yeah.
a nugget or two and feels that their time listening was worth it.
Well, at this time of the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. So I'll ask you this question. In relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
I said it earlier today. Leadership isn't a title. Leadership is about how you decide to show up. And do we have time for a quick story? 1 minute?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It can be summed up in the story of the lighthouse and the tugboat. So there once was a lighthouse and a tugboat. They were good friends. And the tugboat's job every day was to go out from the port and look for ships that are in distress, that need help getting back to the port. And they did that day after day. And that's how they help ships. Hard work, lots of energy. And the lighthouse, what they did is they perched up on the top and they shined their light out into the harbor. And they allowed the ships that needed help to use that light to come safely in the harbor, helping hundreds of ships. And the only thing the lighthouse has to do is just shine a brighter light. And I use that story and that examples because so many of us are tugboats, just grinding, going out there trying to help, grinding, going out there to help. And to me, leadership is about work on creating a brighter light. Shine your light out there and you will have so many more people and opportunities come to you. That's what leaders do.
Yeah, well said. So what's the future look like for you and your company? I mean, are you just going to keep doing what you're doing and work with more clients? Are
Well,
you going to scale
yeah,
it?
if you
What
know
are you
me,
trying to do?
doing what I'm doing, I'm always looking at other things and all that. Trying to stay still is hard, but yeah, we have 8 coaches now on our team.
Awesome.
I'm looking at maybe bringing on another coach or two, but that's kind of the immediate future in the next year. So looking at helping, more people. We've branched into other industries, like I said, similar. I like the allied health world. So doing that, for me personally, I still coach. I love it. I'll never stop doing it. So I always like looking for people that I feel I can do really great work with, my best work with, that are maybe outside of my comfort zone. So I start looking for people just in other businesses, bigger financial revenues and bigger things, and I really like doing that because it's all, when it comes down to it, you're coaching the individual. So I'm kind of doing that right now. And then kind of just seeing what other opportunities
Yeah.
um, come. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where I'm
Well,
focusing
great.
right now.
Well, Jamie, this has been a real pleasure. Enjoyed talking with you today, and I think you definitely have the vision of what a lot of practitioners need to do, and the way they need to look at things. So it's great you're out there helping them, and hopefully they succeed and do well, and pay it forward as well. So thanks for your time today. Appreciate it, and I'm sure I'll see you down the road.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, take care. See ya. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orange, the word, .coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.